Open up your mind, kid. Don't you know that time circles you, cruising for them jewels instead of searching for the tools? To be a better you. You the reflection the sun absorbed, cause your melanin be glistening, body on one accord. You had the hood tripping, making millions out of them niggas you grew up with. Took everything you had so you would never make it to the point and stick to your soul, cause your chemistry so lethal. You have the power to cure the kingdom or cripple it, let that settle. I just wanna be a good influence to your mental. Parting all these metaphors, but I don't want them to get it straight. This shit deep, yeah. Now watch it replay. Open up your mind, sis. Don't you know that time circles you, choosing for them jewels instead of searching for the tools? To be a better you. We the reflection the sun absorbed, cause our melanin be glistening, body on one accord. We had the hood tripping, making millions out of them niggas we grew up with. They took everything we had, so we'll never make it to the point and stick to our soul, cause our chemistry so lethal. We have the power to cure the kingdom or cripple it, let that settle. I just wanna be a good influence to our mental. Parting all these metaphors, but I don't want them to get it straight. This shit deep, yay. Didn't you understand that replay? This shit real. Don't you understand a man is not really a man, but a broken plan said we make the world one. Capitalized on it, son, so your mind became the victim of colonization. Took your values and they twisted, religion and they twisted, morale and then they twisted. Now you a new you. Took you from the land that was yours, created theirs, made you abandon your language and take theirs, and now you even speaking different. Took the books and the food and the materials and minerals all out your hands and replaced it with all the consumeristic brands and gans and guns. Just to profit off the thought that wasn't even us. This ain't even us. My name is Kenya Abbott Jr., and this is For the Culture. Welcome to another episode of Politicking. I am Kenya Abbott Jr., and I'm so excited about this episode because it's the youth takeover. We're talking about culture, communities, and what these experiences look like for young people across the city of Detroit. Later on, I'll be joined by some awesome students from Voyager College Preparatory High School. Big shout out to Mrs. Jasmine Brooks for allowing us to come in and talk to your students. Later on, we'll be joined by an awesome youth spotlight. But right now, I want to kick it off with my one-on-one with a former high school classmate, Paige Watkins. I'm so excited to be joined by a fellow Cass Tech class of 2010 graduate. We are currently both enrolled in our Masters of Community Development at the University of Detroit Mercy. My homie, Paige Watkins. Welcome to Politicking.
Thanks, I appreciate that.
So before we get started, I just want you to kind of tell the people about yourself, what you're doing here in the community, and even what, prompted you to do this work.
For sure. So I'm Paige Watkins. I am a queer, non-binary community organizer and future community developer in Detroit. And I consider myself an educator. I'm a facilitator. Right now I'm co-directing a media program supporting film projects. And I do organizing work around criminal justice and racial equity.
Okay. So I want you to dive a little bit into this whole idea of community building, because we're talking about for the culture, and I think that a part of culture is community and what we're joined by. So talk a little bit about community building and how that's important for overcoming social injustice.
Yeah, I think community is everything. At the end of the day, community is where we get our most strength, our most power from. James and Grace Lee Boggs, two longtime philosophers, organizers from Detroit. James always used to say, or there's this quote about, it is only in relation to other bodies and somebodies that anybody is somebody. And it's this idea that I can only be who I am in relationship to other people. And in order for those relationships to work and be generative, we have to make sure that there's equal power, that folks aren't getting less resources than other people, that everybody's basic needs are being met. And so I think that what's really important for our culture and like what sustains culture and what sustains people and communities is relationships. It's interdependence. It's that. And the course of building that is really a hard thing. Thinking across political ideas or thinking across race or thinking across like privilege or access, but so important.
And so outside of community, I mean, because we travel, things like that, looking at places that you've been, talk a little bit about that, and tell me, have you seen any similarities or differences when we're looking at community, particularly when we're identifying Detroit in comparison to a lot of these spaces?
Yeah, so I actually am very grateful to be able to travel a lot. I've been to Europe several times, been able to go to like the Caribbean, the Bahamas, and recently was able to go to Cuba for a study abroad program as a part of our master's cohort or whatever. And I think particularly what we saw, because the experience in Havana was a different type of traveling experience than I'm usually on. Like I never did, that's not true. I did a study tour once in undergrad, but it was like a week thing. I never did that type of cultural exchange work like we were trying to do in Havana. And I think what I noticed there particularly is community being so important. Like the different grassroots organizations that we got to visit and the ways that they're doing community development there is very like place-based. It's very much like we're building this here for like the kids that go to school around here, or we're building this here for the elders that live in this like neighborhood. It's very much about how we're supporting each other in our immediate vicinity. And I think a lot of that has to do because of technology, different access to like Wi-Fi, you know, that's way different than we experience here. And so those types of things keep us linked in ways that maybe we're not used to in America. You know, I think we're used to being connected, but maybe we're not always used to talking to our neighbors or getting to know our neighbors or doing intentional like organizing or place-based work that's like neighborhood specific. It's not that it doesn't happen, but
you touched a little bit on even looking at, you know, why those differences take place. Do you think there are things that we can learn from communities outside of Detroit?
Oh, hell yeah. You know, I think that's the most important thing, right? Like I believe that Detroit and the people of Detroit has a lot to teach the world. And at the same time, it's also true that communities around the world and around the country and even if we're thinking like intergalactically and all that types of shit, like we have stuff to learn from them, you know, and the only ways that we'll learn that is maybe through the internet, maybe, but that's not always a guaranteed way to learn stuff. But it's mostly being able to go there and talk to people and like have relationships with folks that are living those things and can teach you what you need to learn. So I think that I'm definitely grateful for the experience in Cuba because I made relationships with people that I'm still talking to. You know what I mean? Like I'm still like hitting folks up and like building and like thinking about like when am I going to go back? When are they going to get to come here? So that exchange is so important.
And so what do you think is the biggest challenge in community building, particularly in marginalized communities? What is it that holds us back from having that real community building taking place?
Capitalism, colonialism, like all of this shit. Like all those systems teach us is that we have to worry about ourselves, and that we're all individuals and we are responsible for ourselves. And if you don't work hard enough, you don't deserve things. You're not worthy of basic needs. That's what we're learning, right? That's like maybe not necessarily what we believe when I say it like that, but like this is what we're learning in the society that we live in. And as marginalized people, as people who are constantly oppressed, as people who are like literally constantly being criminalized, like being killed, being like victimized and hurt daily, like physically, emotionally, all of that. It's so hard for us to think outside of the systems that have been taught. And I think that really holds us back. Like we have to get this money. So in order to get my money, like maybe I can let my friends come along for the ride, or maybe I just gotta worry about my money. You know what I mean? It's like, if I'm only worried about that, then what about my other folks? Like, what about my people, you know? So I think that's like a huge challenge. It's just getting past individualism, getting through oppression that capitalism and patriarchy and all of that stuff teaches us. And another one is this idea of access. What I was kind of talking about in Cuba with like why we have to like buy Wi-Fi cards, and there's like specific parks you have to go
It was
to
a
in order
journey
use the
to
internet.
get there,
You know
right?
what I
It was
mean?
a
Like,
journey.
it's not just Wi-Fi everywhere. Hotels are not guaranteed to have Wi-Fi. Our hotel was supposed to, but like they didn't. Like, you know, weird stuff. Not weird, but just not what we're used to.
Yeah.
But in Detroit, there's a significant percentage, and I don't know the number off the top of my head, but a significant percentage of people in the city who don't have access to internet. And then there are organizations like the Detroit Community Technology Project who are doing work to like build internet, like, you know, give access to free Wi-Fi to people that don't have it. And, you know, but that's a challenge, like people that don't have access to stuff, people that aren't, they're getting their water shut off for like small bills, people that are getting displaced out of their home, kicked out of their homes, like off of BS for real, like that holds us back. We don't feel like we can lean on other people when we're like dealing with all of that constant like displacement, constant like, you know, inaccessibility. Like,
Totally agree. And so if you had any advice to give young people in the city of Detroit or anywhere in the world, particularly touching the Black diaspora, because, you know, that's where I'm focused at. But I'm just curious, just for young people, like, what would you tell them when it comes to community building or even this idea of, you know, collective culture?
I think, so I'm grateful that I get to work with like kids all day, like not all day, every day anymore, but I very much make it a point to work with like middle schoolers, elementary school, high school kids or whatever. And I think the one thing I always try to embody and exemplify when I'm with them, and what I want to be able to tell every middle schooler I ever meet, is how important it is to, it's something about compassion, but not compassion for the sake of like turning a blind eye to bullshit, but like compassion to like have empathy for like what other people are living and what other people are going through, which I think gets lost sometimes in middle school life and high school life of like, you know, I don't care about what you're going through, like your shoes are dusty, or I don't care what you're going through, like, you know, whatever, like you're roasting all these people and going in all these people. So I just think there's the idea of like, how can we hold each other with compassion? And then there's also, I think something that's really important that I would love to share with other young folks is like how important it is to stand in your own power. Kids get told to shut up all the time. They got to do things a certain way, do things different than the way you're told to do it. You're wrong, and you're like relegated to the back of the room or outside of the classroom or whatever the situation is. And it's like, no, like stand in that. Stand in your dignity, be your full self, be who you are all the time, you know, unapologetically. And people will rock with it or people won't, but like you'll be who you are. Sure. And that's what's going to let other people also be able to be who they are.
Hello. Tell them, Paige, okay? I'm so excited to have this interview. I'm so excited about the work that you're doing in the city. Shout out to you, Adi, for bringing us back together so that we can connect and actually see where we are working in these spaces and really trying to impact the communities in which we're a part of. Thank you so much for joining me on Politicking. And now y'all get ready for our Youth Takeover panel. And now we're joined by some young, phenomenal folks talking about culture, not only in the city of Detroit, but abroad, and what that looks like. But first, I want to introduce my guest. Joining me today is none other than Sarita Darby. We also are joined by Idalis Carrion, Tyreek Williams, and Antoinette Love Humble. How are y'all doing today?
Great.
Yeah, I'm doing real good.
Good. So first, I just want them to kind of tell you about themselves and how they got here in the first place. Let's start with you, Sarita.
Hi everyone, my name is Sarita Darby. I am a social justice educator in Detroit. I'm also the founder of a nonprofit whose goal is to decolonize tribal culture around the world, especially amongst our young people of color. It is called Wonders Revolution, and that's why I'm here today to talk about the culture.
Well, I'm a senior at Voyager College Prep. I'm very active on campus and stuff. I'm part of the college access team. I plan to go to Wayne State University in the fall, and I plan to major in fashion design and merchandising, but I want to venture into communications. And yeah, I'm a very outspoken person, so I guess that's how I'm here.
I got recommended by this from Ms. Brooks, and I started my own video game club because I'm very passionate about games in 10th grade, and I'm just trying to keep the streak alive. So I'm trying to pass on my club to a ninth grader, hopefully, to keep it going for as long as possible.
And me, I'm Antoinette. I'm a senior as well. I plan on attending Michigan State University in the fall, double majoring in education and psychology, and later I plan on being a teacher, and then later on being a therapist, and then like trying to I want to open up some businesses, maybe look at real estate, stuff like that. But that's all.
Well, I am glad to be joined by all of you. We have a lot of diverse ideas with us at the table, different areas and fields that you all want to go in. So I'm looking forward to a very interesting conversation. So let's just kick this off. We're talking about culture. What is culture? And particularly to young people, what does that mean to y'all?
I feel like culture is a multitude of things. I feel like culture is a lifestyle. It's the way you walk, talk, the way you interact with people, the norms you set for yourself, and the norms people set for you. So I think it's just a lifestyle.
Yeah.
I agree with what she said. I think that culture is it's how you and your group of friends or your family is how you guys live every day. How you guys eat, how you guys dress, how you guys get up every morning, what you listen to, what you don't like, what you like. It's just how you're living, basically.
Yeah, it really defines your character. It goes into as far back as your ancestors, back into your ethnicity.
Yeah. And so do y'all think that culture plays a role in how you advance experiences that you have every day? And so looking at, how you're brought up or what it is that your diverse backgrounds look like, does that have an impact on growing your culture at all or advancing your culture?
I definitely think so. So for me, I'm a Hispanic woman in Detroit. I grew up in the southwest side of Detroit, but I've always been at this school, which is a predominantly black school. So since I'm a part of Detroit, I have that urban side of me, but I'm also a Hispanic woman where my grandparents are deeply rooted. So I have that side of me. So I definitely think that's what makes me stand out. Most definitely, I always think because I'm a Hispanic woman from Detroit, I bring something different to the table. I'm always able to stand out, and I think I'm super unique because of that. So yeah, I think that has all of that has a lot to do with who I am as a person and the way I speak, the opportunities I get, all that.
Well, it's the same thing with me. Almost, not a little bit, not really, but my mom, she's mixed. Her mom is white, and I grew up around mostly black people. And then third grade, we got transferred. Well, my mom transferred us to a predominantly white school. So that was such a culture shock. It was just everything they did was so much different from how I grew up in Detroit on the west side. It was just so different. And then after 8th grade, I got transferred to a predominantly black school once again, and that was another culture shock. When I was younger, I was around black people, and some of the ways I grew up with faded away. So when I got to black schools again, it was they looked at me different. The way I talked, it was different to them. The way I dressed was different to them. What I listened to was different. And it was another culture shock once again, even though I was with my people,
Right, yeah.
So
Yeah, I agree. My family, my mom and dad are Jamaican, so we take a trip every 2 years to Jamaica to visit back the rest of my siblings. And it's nice to go back and revisit, your family's origins and just take a chance to take in all the culture.
And so y'all kind of already touched on it a little bit in this idea of a time that you may not have felt a part of the culture. I know, hey, I went to Michigan State. You're on your way to Michigan State. That is a predominantly white institution. So I definitely had days where I didn't feel like I was a part of the culture. Is there a time, you kind of already hinted on it. Has there been a time that y'all haven't felt a part of the culture? And feel free to chime in on this one, Siri.
Okay, so for me, since I'm at a predominantly black school, and even when I switched to another school, prior to coming back to this school once again, it was another predominantly black school. So a lot of the times I can relate to everything that everybody's talking about because this is my culture. But they will purposely exclude me because they feel oh, she can't relate. And I'm just sitting there that, it's kind of weird for me because I can relate probably more than you. I've dealt with the nitty gritty of things, But I guess that's the only time that I feel left out, when people purposely do things you get body language and stuff and it's she don't know, or they'll seclude certain things and be black parents did this, black parents did that, and I'm You know, like I think that's a culture thing. That's an urban thing, you know. But I guess they don't exclude me to be mean, but it's like I don't know if she feels what we're talking about. But I guess that's the only time.
I think it's important, like when you're thinking about when you're in a space, like when your culture is probably like a little different than others, like explaining to them like, hey, this is who I am, let me know who you are. So it's like then you build those connections because you realize like, dang, we more the same than we are different. So it's like, dang, it's a lot of similarities going on. But when you do get in spaces where it's like, dang, this ain't what I'm about, like this ain't really how I was raised or what I grew up on, but then you able to learn too. So take the opportunity as a learning experience when you're not in a space where your culture is probably not appreciated. Like get to know other cultures, let them know about you. Like let me introduce myself. Like, this is who I am. Who are you, right? So yeah, that's important.
Thank you. That's a good tip.
Yeah, I agree, 100%. Because when I go back to Jamaica, it's like I was born and raised in Michigan. So going back and playing with my friends, it's like I don't speak patois like them. So they still understand me and I still understand them because both of my parents came from Jamaica and that's all they talk.
So let's switch gears a little bit because you're talking about Jamaica, you know, set the tone in the room.
Okay.
Have you all traveled? And if you have, is traveling important? And why is it important to you if you answer that yes?
Well, I have traveled. I never traveled out of the country, not yet, at least. I've traveled to like Washington, D.C., around that area, Chicago, obviously.
Which is still a culture shock, right?
Yeah, all of that. And it really did, like, when I went to Washington, D.C., it was so many different people there, like, everywhere, just taking a jog in the morning, just everything. It was so many different people there. And it is so important to see that it's people out there that's not just you. So it's like you're more comfortable around them. You can speak to them because some people are really nervous around like different races or different cultures. And it's just important to go see stuff that you're not used to. Like get out of your comfort zone.
I could definitely vouch for that too. Like in this past summer, I went to Puerto Rico and I'm Puerto Rican, so to me, I was like, I'm going with my people. Like I can find like, when I got there, let me tell you, I was like, oh, they're way different. Their culture, again, it's a big culture shock. So for one of the main things that I did notice when in like natural conversation, I said the word Hispanic, and my cousins were like very offended by that, and I didn't understand why. And it's because the culture here, we identify as Hispanic, Latin. That's like normal. Over there, they don't like the word because of the origin of the colonization of, you know, all of that stuff. So that was one thing that was different. The food is different, the way they talk is different, but I would definitely say that experience was very humbling, and like I don't regret it. Even though when I was there I did cry, like I was homesick, I wanted to go home so bad. But I definitely think like after that I was like, I need to travel a lot because I need to get used to like not feeling comfortable, because that's all it was. That's why I was crying. I felt so uncomfortable. I was like, they're nothing like me. They have different expectations of me. I can't dress how I want to dress because they're looking at me like, you know.
Right.
So I definitely think traveling is like super important. It's imperative actually. Like you need that. I feel like you need that to build character because after that it taught me so much.
Yes, I want to speak because she is saying everything I'm saying. Like it's like we the same person. So it's so as a person who's traveled a lot, I feel like most of my life experiences, the most lessons I learned have been on my journeys around the world, right? Yeah. So when you talk about experiences, I feel like you learn more from experiences. Right. I learned more traveling than I did in the classroom. So when I'm in the classroom, like I am a teacher, I try to give my students an experience. Like every day it's an experience. Like this not a typical classroom because when you travel, you learn stuff, you learn about other people. So I teach mostly Black kids, so I teach Black culture. Like I wouldn't even say I'm an English teacher. I wouldn't even say that like I teach Black culture. I'm an African American history like teacher. So when you travel, like you learn about other stuff, you able to go home, and then home seems different because you learned so much when you was away. But then you're able to like impact other people around you. Like, well, I learned this here and this there. Like even like going to like learning like Hispanic, like knowing not to say that, because like when you said that, I'm like you can't really say that. A lot of people don't agree with that. Right. And then when you go to these other countries, it's like, okay, you learning stuff, you bring that back home, you're able to interact more effectively with other cultures in your own community. Right. So it's important when you're saying traveling. It's very important. Yep. So it's why I'm so passionate about traveling. Like I'm trying to help other young people of color travel. So when you think of like people of color traveling, it's not really respected, it's not really encouraged because of who we are, because we've been shackled for so long, staying in one place. Yes. So it's like take those shackles off, let's move to our own spaces to where we can actually empower ourselves in our communities, right? So that's important in traveling. Yep. Definitely agree.
No, got a little snap on the panel. What about you?
Well, I've been going to this school since 6th grade, and a lot of students haven't been able to travel, guys. You know this. So hearing them not being educated by not seeing the world or not knowing what's going on in the world is really mind-boggling. Because students really don't think that you can open a window on an airplane, which you cannot do. But some students think you can open a window on an airplane. It's just crazy.
So for you, it's more so just this piece of the experience to even know what it
just getting
entails,
knowledge.
like what
Right.
traveling
Just-
even entails.
Right.
Just knowing. But I want to ask you a question. So you've been to Jamaica. So when you come back, you tell your classmates, like, I've been to Jamaica. Like, what type of questions do you get?
Oh, they ask all types of questions. Like, what did you eat? What did you do there? Did you hurt yourself? How are your friends? They ask so many questions. And I just try to answer as many as I possibly can.
Do you think, like, some of the questions come from, like, a little bit of ignorance? Like, they just don't know? Or are they more
Yeah,
curious?
they're just curious.
Or,
honestly.
okay.
I'm
Okay.
trying to get more knowledge.
I will say though that I do think that's part of a culture thing, like, because we have a picture of what a culture is in every area. So like for Jamaica, I know what I think about it is probably not what it was, just how I thought Puerto Rico was, and it's like, you know, you can't really judge something for what it is unless you go there and experience that yourself. So
Or what you see in the media, because you know they ain't
Right.
portraying it, right?
Exactly.
So, like, yeah, you got to go experience it yourself to
Right.
really know what it's about.
yeah.
And so, I know I didn't kind of ask y'all this question prior to, but because of the conversation, I think it's important to touch on it. Do y'all think that we have a specific culture here that we all can identify as? I mean, all being from what, Detroit or being from America, like, what does culture look like for us here?
I feel like there's different cultures everywhere in America, but America as a whole, I do think we have a culture, and our culture is, I can say from when I went to Puerto Rico, part of the experience humbled me because I realized when I came back that I picked up on certain things, and it's like we're very pampered, and that's part of our culture. We're pampered people. We don't think who we are. Some of us are like, I'm humble, but until you have to live in a place that's like, I'm not used to this, like this bugs on me in the middle of the night, you know, until you experience that, then you can be like, okay, I know what humble really is, because here we're pampered, like we got it like that. Even if we're the lowest of the low here, we got it like that compared to the people in other parts of the world.
Wow.
Yeah.
Like, speaking on that, so I met, and I know Kenya also went here, but going to Cuba, and I know people say, like, Cuba is a country that likes democracy, this and that. Why would you want to go there? Like, that's not really a luxury travel experience. But when you want to talk about culture, Cuba is culture. So
We read about it.
yeah, so when I went there, I'm like, these people don't have anything but each other.
Yeah.
So when you don't have anything, you gotta work for everything. It's like you appreciate, like just in the streets, like just seeing the community, like didn't have nothing but was the happiest people ever. And so when you come back to America, you see people unappreciative of little things, right? It's like, okay, so what are we doing? Like, how can I change my mindset to where I'm happy with the littlest things? Because it's like, you realize, like, dang, we are pampered. Like, dang, I'm living a luxury experience.
Yes.
Even though I understand struggle being from Detroit,
Yes.
you know, we have to go through a lot of things too. But like going to other countries and seeing people still happy with the little stuff that they got. Come on now, but we in America being greedy, like come on now. But that's the American culture.
Yep,
That's
like, one thing.
we greedy.
Yep.
Yeah,
One thing that is what I picked up on here. We're big on. We capitalize on everything. So that's part of our attitude. Like, I'm all for myself, even if your family's so important to you. It's different in other places where you don't have materials to, you know, you have each other to love, to bond with. Like, there's no disconnect. There's not technology and stuff like that. So I could definitely say one of the things that I had to check myself about, like, while I was there, was I gotta put this nasty face, like this nasty expression I have on my face. It has to go away because them people are so nice, and it's like, you guys don't have anything. You guys are, your house is a cement, right? Your guys' house is like a cement little area. It's like half of this room. So, and they were like super happy. Everybody was real welcoming, eye contact, smiling. How are you doing? Speaking to me in Spanish, and I'm like, I don't even know what you're saying, but I know
so much love. You felt that love. Come on now. I always felt the
like, I
love.
want to just give you a hug, because in America, that's what I did pick up on. Part of our culture is, you know, like, I don't know who you are, I don't know where you came from, and it's weird because we're all in a mixing pot here, but they welcome you like you look different. You know, they give you that, like, you seem different. You know, I want to get to know you. So
Like, like my math teacher, Miss Wanko, y'all know Miss Wanko.
Yeah.
She's from Nigeria. Her husband's from Nigeria too. He grew up and he didn't wear shoes to school. He grew up poor. She wasn't as poor, you know, when she grew up. She was quite, I don't want to say privileged, but she was blessed to have like everything that she needed, and her 16 siblings were living decent. But she would tell, like, one time I had a conversation where she told me about how her husband grew up, and she said you Americans are spoiled. I was looking around, I was like, for real? I was like, are you serious? I was like, we in Detroit, people getting shot every day, people losing their cousins, their brothers, their aunties, everybody. She was like, oh, that's nothing. She said, what y'all going through? That's nothing compared to what we went through. And I was listening to her and I was like, dang, you're right. We do act spoiled and privileged like all the time. We complain, like some people complain they have to take the bus to school. It's people that walk through dirt and mud for 30 miles just to get an education, and we're taking it for advantage because it's free to us, because everybody has a high school education. They take it for granted. Like, we really are spoiled when it comes to everything little. Well, it's little to us, but everything, we just take it all for granted. And I really believe that's in our culture, like being privileged, being spoiled. Even the people who have it like rough, so to say, you know, like they're still privileged in a way, you know?
Yeah, because you have, I'm touching on the education part that you talked on. There's still places in the world that education is not a thing.
Right.
Since the age of 2, you're up and working. Like, there's no such thing as school. Even now here, some of the Mexican immigrants here that, like, from my little sister and her conversation with her friends, now, like, with the Trump stuff, their parents are like, education is not that important. We got to get as much money as we can before we're kicked out. So even here in America with our peers, they go through like much worse than us. So it's just a mindset. We look at like the glass is half empty rather than it's half full.
Right.
Yeah.
Just really stay optimist. I want to touch back on what you said, how social media is really clouding our image of the world. Like, it's giving us fake news. How we need to like travel and experience the things on it for ourselves, but some people don't have the opportunity or, you know, the trust to.
So y'all kind of talked a little bit, and I'm loving this conversation, by the way. I like to be able to sit back and listen to what young folks have to say, because y'all are the future. Y'all are the next leaders. And so just to see that y'all are already thinking like that makes me feel at ease, right, as the older person.
Right. I'm learning more from y'all. I'm like,
Exactly, right? And so y'all kind of already touched on this idea around how culture has impacted y'all through family. Are there other ways that culture has impacted who y'all are?
Culture hasn't. I know that we might touch on this, but it has impacted our education. Because, for example, I didn't know this until like I had like a friend who was real close to me who talked about him being in like a white school, and then Antoinette actually like brought that idea to my mind again. And then I had a teacher who was in an area where it was like a lot of white people. So first of all, her teaching styles versus the way that I'm used to interacting with teachers that are from the same community as I am. So the interaction was very like shaky in the beginning because her expectations of me were like, you know, there was like, I can't get down with that. That's not how I interact. So I think like it can touch you in so many ways. Like, it's something that's like, it's just manifesting. It's like snowballed into every way. It's like a lifestyle, like I said. So it gets into everything. How you walk, talk, everything.
Eat. Hello. Yeah. So you touched on education, like your class. So do you think it's important that you actually have teachers that look like you and that share the same life experiences as you?
I do. I think that's imperative because, like I said, that relationship with that teacher was like me and you. I can't do it because they did not come from the same background as me. You know. Yeah. So I feel like it's. But I do feel like it's also imperative that you do have people that are not like you, because in the real world, like in America specifically, this is a melting pot of people. So if you're not used to something that's different than you, you're going to have a hard time. It's going to be like, you talked about culture shock everywhere. Like every day you're going to be like, and that's how you box yourself. So I feel like it's important to have a balance. I think everything is balanced.
Absolutely. Especially when y'all go to them PWIs, y'all like, hey, I ain't never seen it, but you got to deal with it because there's going to be stuff that come around.
I think having somebody around you all the time, like your teachers, for example, like you're in school a lot, like most of your life you're in school.
Right.
And when you see people who don't look like you start to like shift to their ways almost. Like I know when I was younger, it was most of my teachers were white. They were white older ladies, you know. And I went to school with mostly white people. I started to shift their ways. Like I always wore my hair straight. I never wore my hair like this until I got to black schools in ninth
Girl,
grade.
your hair is prettier like that.
Oh, thank you. But yeah, I started shifting to their ways. Like I started to hate the way I looked. Like I was like, dang, all these people look like this. I was like, let me look like this. I never gotten a son. Now I love the sun. I love wearing my hair like this. I love being around my people. I love being around anybody. Anybody is cool to be around. But I love being around my people. I love being around people who look like me. Like I love little girls. I love like showing them like you're beautiful just how you are. Like this is how you were made. And it's important to see people that look like you because when you don't, it's like you really just forget who you are. And it's important to see like people who don't look like you because when you see people who are always like you all the time, you start to like forget like there's other people in the world. You start to forget their culture. You forget like how to consider them in your everyday life, you know?
Right.
So you just stay in your comfort zone. Like it's important to get out your comfort zone.
Yeah.
That's dope that you said that because it just brought something else into my mind that even though we was talking about balance as in like who your teachers are and the people you interact with, I think it goes for anything. Because like you said, you started to change who you were because of the people you was around. So that's dope.
Yeah, it's nice having people to relate to, and also people that are really different, because things like impact you subconsciously. Like it's just gonna happen.
Right.
So as y'all are gearing up to be these awesome college going students, how has this idea of culture impacted your future goals? Like I know we touched on education a little bit, but just I know you want to go into like fashion design and you are here a gamer and you know you're seeking to go to this PWI, right? And so it's just what has pushed y'all? Has culture had an influence or impact on y'all choices leaving high school?
Okay, let me speak on that. Okay, so for me, fashion design, first of all, I want to say that like I've always been like interested in it. Even since I was little, like my mom would say that I like opted for like colorful things. It was just, you know, something that I picked up on since I was little. But I will say, without being where I'm from, like that wouldn't have been I wouldn't have followed that path, you know. And I don't know if it was natural or because subconsciously that was around me, so I picked up on it. But I think that's a way like the urban communities in general express themselves. If you see, it could be the person who talks about they don't really have like the best of meals on their table every day at dinner, but they got the best clothes. So fashion is important in our community, especially in like the urban communities. Even in the music we listen to and stuff, clothing is important. Like when you look at somebody, you judge them off of like their appearance, their aesthetic, what they're wearing. So I think where I'm from, my culture and stuff like that, that's how we express ourselves. If anything, if we don't got nothing, we got the clothes on our back. So I think that definitely influenced me to segue into fashion design.
What about you?
I had a lot of friends online. That's why it's like a good pastime to just play and just relieve all the stress into the game, because it's just virtual reality. It's the future. It's just gonna keep getting bigger and bigger. So having the type of friends that come from different parts of the world, you just get a feel for how everybody acts. So you just take it into consideration and just roll off with how they go.
And that also becomes a space, it seems like, where different people can interact. You know, even throughout culture, like we all can vibe to this game. Isn't that crazy to me? Like
Jamaica, some of my friends play the same game. So
like it could be a war on the other side of the world, and you guys are all in your happy place at that time. Yeah.
What about you?
Oh, well, I think culture is the reason I want to do everything I want to do. Like, seeing so many different things made me want to meet, like, so many different people and, like, really get to know them. That's why I want to teach. Like, now I understand how important education really is. Like, and I really want to give that to students who don't understand that in low-income neighborhoods, in urban neighborhoods. Like, I really want to teach. Like, that is such a big passion. I love helping people so much. And that's why I want to later become, like, a therapist and, like, study psychology. Because I want to, like, break the barrier. I'm writing a paper about this now, like break the barrier of mental illness and the Black community.
And the
like,
stigma that comes with
yes, it has such a negative stigma, and
It's Mental Health Awareness Month too. Okay, speak on it.
Okay. Go ahead.
and I really want to, like, if I didn't, it was a time I didn't notice, like, what was going around me and the people, like, how they were acting, like, how their community was affecting them and stuff like that. And when I started noticing that, I was like, I really like this. I was like, I gotta do something about this one. And sure enough, I am.
Yes.
Yeah.
So everything I do is for my people. So everything I do is for the culture, right? So like from teaching to making sure we decolonize travel culture and bring like travel amongst the diaspora. But when I specifically want to speak to what you said about mental health and being a teacher and a therapist. I just feel like in a Black community we don't talk about mental health.
Yeah,
we're not
it's a
effectively.
taboo.
It's like just get over it. Like I've had people like tell, like I'm a teacher, tell some of my kids like get over it. Why you crying about that? Like get over it. And it's like no. How do you solve problems? You talk about it. So are we going to talk about these issues so we can overcome them? So that's what I'm doing like with my students now. Like really talking about trauma and mental health and really giving them the space to heal from it. So like that transition for them, their pain. Now they can really put it into other things and they can grow. Like now they're like their characters are better. Now they're able to speak and own their voices. But we don't do that in the Black community, and that's kind of a part of even like the Latin American community. Like even there, like we so steadfast and we so purposeful that we just keep going. Like that's our culture. Like we just keep going. Like we so resilient, but sometimes it's like too much of a good thing can be bad. Like we too resilient. Like let's take a step back and talk about these issues, then keep going. Like that's how you solve problems. So, but that's important in our community, right?
I will say, like for me, I don't know if this is a urban thing, period, a Latin thing, a minority thing. I don't know, but I know like in my house specifically, I did go through a phase where I was dealing with mental health and it was serious. And when I brought it to my mom's attention, she was so angry that she was ready to hit me. Like because in our community, it's like, especially like the people she was raised by, it's like you work through everything. You don't got time to cry. Like you don't have. There's nobody's gonna give you a handout. You don't have white privilege. You know. You got to do what you got to do. Right. So if you're sad, baby girl, you're going through something with your husband. You don't feel like you're being treated equal, even in society laws and stuff. Especially back then, like women, period, we are always put down. So that I feel like that's another thing. Women in their health, because we got a lot on our back, and
especially women of color.
Yes. So, but I know, like, definitely in my house, that's not something that was accepted until like I was like, you guys are gonna listen to me or I'm leaving, because
you gotta protect your peace.
Yep. And in my house, how it was before I broke that barrier was you power through everything. You don't got time to cry and sit down and be sad. Like, but I had to let them know, like, this is important. This is something we need to talk about, because I know 9 times out of 10. 2 out of 6 of my siblings are going through the same thing as me, But to my parents, they were the authoritarian people, and they're just like, you got to do what you got to do. You have all A's. I don't care if you're sad. I don't care about the excuse, But until I brought that to their attention, and it took a long time, like years, until they was like, okay, like we get it. It's something serious. We got to take time out to, like focus on the mental. So.
Yeah.
And trauma is real, period, as far as just growing up in certain environments, which again becomes a part of this culture, because no matter where you at across this world, if you're growing up in areas or spaces that are just not conducive to healthy quality of life, then you're going to deal with that.
Exactly. And I feel like that's why it's prominent in urban areas more than anywhere. So the fact that we're lacking in that aspect where we don't pay attention to mental health, it's like, for real, like we've been through the most trauma.
But we don't have that privilege. Like y'all said, like it's a privilege thing. Like somebody told me, like, our white counterparts, somebody dies in their family, they're able to take a week off for grief. But a kid dies, and one of my kids' family members die, they show up for school the next day. Like it ain't no time off. Like we still gotta push through. But it's like we don't have that privilege to do that. Like and that whole, like when people say you got the same 24 hours as like these celebrities, like no, we don't have the same 24 hours. Like we up here doing way more, pushing through way more struggles than like a Beyonce or a Drake. Like it's a lot. You know what I'm saying? It's a lot. So it's like. You gotta really take that into consideration, like the struggle
it's so important
for the culture, right?
I will say though that like I feel like some of the most successful people came from the same places as us, and that's because there's a beauty in like our struggle. I feel like in our urban communities, any minority people, like there's a beauty in our struggle, and we took different tools to get to the same place that people with privilege, which in America is white people, we had to extra try to do what we had to do. You know, we powered through different issues without professional help. Even when it was brought to my attention that you could speak to somebody professional, like with the teachers at school. Part of my culture is like I don't speak to nobody professional. I
It's not their business.
Right.
But it's, I mean, some of the people with letters behind their name lack integrity too. So it's like, just because you know you professional or you got, you know, credentials, it don't mean like you can relate to me or you have integrity. So I'm like, I'm kind of fasting off for you. So yeah.
See, and that's why it's important because we need people that look like us, been from the same places that we are from. Yep, and that they're professional. Like I'm glad you're going into the psychology thing because you're a person who's been through that, you know? So you can, I don't want to sit down and talk to a woman who was wealthy and, you know, about my mental health. She didn't grow up like me, right? She don't look like me. Her family hasn't gone through the same things as me. She hasn't faced the same trials and tribulations as me. So it's like, I can't relate. So you're going to be a definite helping hand. Like,
I was reading about that, like,
I'm sorry. 100%.
I was reading about that a little bit from my paper, and it was like, this story, and it was this middle-aged black lady. She was doing her master's program or doctor's. I don't remember, one of those. But she was saying like she was getting sexually harassed at work, and she was going home, and she stayed with her parents that were like sick, and she was just depressed, and she had anxiety. She had all these problems. She was like, I need to go talk to somebody. I need help. And she went to a therapist. She was an older white lady, and she was saying, are you sure they're sexually harassing you or is it your attitude? And she was saying like, are you really depressed and stuff like that? She was like questioning her mental health, like her state. Yeah, and she was like, you're not understanding what I'm saying. She was like, I came to you for help and stuff like that. And she was saying, no, I don't think you are, and stuff like that. And she just wasn't understanding where she was coming from because of where she came from. You know, and I don't think you can understand someone who didn't grow up like you completely. Like if you didn't go through what somebody else went through, sometimes it is hard to put yourself in somebody else's shoes, and it's hard to like help them and guide them if you just don't understand, like you don't understand what's going on there in their brain and stuff like that.
It's that difference between empathy and sympathy. Like I feel you, and then like, oh, I feel for you, but I feel you, like same life experience.
And that's nothing but like, I mean, you mentioned it a little bit while she was speaking, but this idea of cultural difference. And so it's just understanding, and what you realize is that people usually with privilege can't. It's just, it's a disconnect because one, you can't identify because you haven't been there. But then you have to also realize that there's choice in that matter, and that you don't even want to identify with it because of the cultural difference. But we could talk about culture and health and all of that all day. And I'm just so happy to just see young folks talking about these type of things because I really think our communities lack it. And I think that our systems, our schools lack these type of conversations in certain instances. So I'm so happy I've been able to connect with y'all. I look forward to all of the things that you guys are going to be doing. And I mean, hey, it started here, right? It started here. I hope. Like the one time we were having a great dialogue around culture, but really going out and not only speaking it, but acting in that culture and being able to culturally exchange across this planet. And so I'm just happy to be here and joined by them. And I hope that y'all have enjoyed it because it's for the culture. And now it's time for our youth spotlight. Today I'm joined by an awesome guest, Miss Indira Edwards. She's my youth spotlight today, and we're talking about culture and this idea of experience and what it does for young people. Thank you so much for joining me today. I'm excited to have you.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, anytime. First, I just want you to tell the people a little bit about yourself, who you are, your background, and things like that.
Cool. Hi, I'm Indira. I'm a 17-year-old from the Detroit area. I'm the child of a Jamaican immigrant and a second-generation German and Ashkenazi Russian Jewish grandmother. So, culture, the whole melting pot aspect of culture, the contact zone of culture has really been a large part of my upbringing, even though I have been surrounded mainly by my white family. I really feel like I've dug deeper to be in touch with every side of who I really am. And it's really followed me not just as a person, but in everything I do as an artist, as a student, as someone who's really involved in the science community, just every community that I'm in, I always try to incorporate my identity.
And that's so awesome. I think that's something that a lot of us miss, is just knowing, you know, who we're made up of, what we're made up of. So it's just, I think it's a blessing and also an advantage for you to be in that space. So can you talk a little bit to us about what culture means to you? I mean, this word is just like, what is culture, right? And so I really want to get your take on it and what it means.
Culture, yeah, it's really hard to define, but like culture, first and foremost, it is history. It is not centuries, it is millennia, it is, you know, thousands of years even. You have, like, since the beginning of mankind, since the beginning of life itself on the planet, that's when I feel culture has really started, you know, to develop itself. Not in the same way that we see culture now, but I mean, you know, you see Darwin's theory of evolution coming through that, and like the way that pack animals interact and, you know, reject, you know, people who are animals, others in their pack that are different, you know, and support certain individuals with specific characteristics. I feel like that's something that has followed since the beginning of time. And as you get into like colonial times, you have this idea of social Darwinism coming in and kind of, you know, being something that I consider to be a really bad thing, and that I hope a lot of others consider to be a really bad thing. You know, rejecting people and, you know, categorizing people based on ascribed statuses, things that they cannot change about themselves, just because, you know, a certain group of people tends to do better than another because of a wide variety of things, not just the color of their skin, but the place that they came from. Maybe the climate was more temperate and they were able to thrive agriculturally and, you know, develop weapons. You have, you know, the concept of guns and germs and everything coming into play to shaping societies. You have, you know, the plague that raged through, you know, Eurasia in the 1300s. And you see that today as well. You see countries in, you know, Africa that are struggling because of their geographical situation. It's not just because, you know, these people with a darker skin tone are not, you know, fit to survive in their environment. They are more than fit to survive in their environment, and I'd say their white counterparts would not be able to do the same things that they can because they've not had the same sets of experiences. So after that long, you know, tangent, culture is also language. It's also, you know, beliefs and attitudes that are formed because of history. And I think something that's really interesting and something that I've experienced a lot is the difficulty that language presents in terms of culture. You have not just, you know, in terms of language barriers if you're to go to a different country, but within our own communities, language, certain words have certain connotations, and it's impossible to escape those, and it's almost as impossible to change people's ideas on what those connotations are in, you know, certain terms.
And I think that was a great, you know, just idea around what culture is, and especially looking at history, because history does impact so much of what we're dealing with today, particularly in our cultures when we're looking at the type of music or dance that we do. You know, like a lot of these things derive from historic times that, you know, we have a disconnect from. So I think that's very important for us to identify with the fact that culture is reflected and basically pushed on by history. So also, just talk a little bit about your travel experience. I know that when we went to Cuba, which was a great experience, we just had a nice time talking about different places that you've been. Talk to us a little bit about your travel experience and how you think that impacts you, as well as how you see differences and similarities in where we are now.
Okay, so the first place I remember going outside of the States was Jamaica, and I was really young, so it was kind of like a sheltered experience. I just remember thinking, wow, there's a lot of trash around here. Like we went to Kingston, which is where my dad is from, and it's kind of like Detroit, but really, really hot, and people have an accent, but it's nice. It's culturally rich. There's a lot of diversity. It's very beautiful, and people really embrace each other there, which is something I'd really like to see more in the States. Next big thing. I went to Europe in 2012 too, and it kind of brought the history books to life. You know, you sit there and you read about Europe and you read about, you know, castles and everything, but you never really feel it until you're there. You see that history. And like as an architect right now, someone studying architecture, like I read the books and I see the things about like Brunelleschi's dome, and I'll be like, yeah, I've been there, I've seen it, I've smelled that place, it's incredible. So yeah, Europe was a really, you know, encompassing type of experience. I feel like it still impacts me largely now, just as I learn more about my world. I went to China this past summer, and I think that was like, it was kind of a breakthrough moment. It's when I realized that the world is so much bigger than I thought it was, like Europe kind of made me feel like the world was smaller than I thought it was, because it was like, you know, this thing that seemed really, really far away is now in front of me and it's part of my world. But China, it was incredible because it's a communist nation and the things that they believe in there are pretty different from here. The culture, it's a very different context in China. The language is very literal, so there's a lot of miscommunication there because sometimes the connotation, the implications of what people are saying don't really, you know, there's like cognitive dissonance with that. But something really interesting about China and something that's kind of similar in the United States is how they deal with religion and how religious tolerance, you know, kind of works there. In the States, we have this issue with xenophobia and anti-Muslim groups and extremists and beliefs, basically. There's a lot of fear in that. But I feel like we don't really know where that fear comes from. We just know that we create more fear because terrorist attacks keep happening.
Right.
And that's where we really need to sit down and listen to people and read through history, and not just read through history, but talk to people who know what it's like to be in both positions, you know? And in China, there's something similar going on there with a Buddhist sect. It's called Falun Gong. And Buddhism is like, it's a meditative religion, right? It's very peaceful. Falun Gong is based around truthfulness and, you know, harmony and, you know, just being in touch with the entire world. And it came about in 1992, I want to say. And, like, there was this whole Buddhism fad in the 90s in China. And then what happened is a bunch of Falun Gong practitioners started disappearing. And, you know, the government started arresting a lot of them. And they were used for, like, the organ harvesting in the early 2000s as well. And it's really strange to see, like, this Buddhist religion being turned into, like, an enemy of the state, basically.
Right.
Yeah, and so I stayed with the host family, actually, and when I was in Hong Kong, we saw, like, a parade against Falun Gong, and so I read up on it a little bit, and I went back to my host family, and I asked them, like, you know, what do you think about Falun Gong? And they said that they believed that Falun Gong was, like, for killing people, and it was against the well-being of the nation. I mean, I took issue with that because I, you know, read up on Falun Gong, but that brought up the issue of how brainwashing in China is a really big deal. But it's not just in China, like it happens in the States with xenophobia. You have people who are afraid of Muslims just because they are Muslim and they know they just have this, you know, connection with terrorism. Even if you don't see it, you know, you just have that fear there. So that was really interesting about China. And then, of course, Cuba, the most beautiful place ever. I loved it, but also there were some issues.
Yeah.
You know, there's a lot to be done in Cuba. And I have friends who went there over spring break, you know, just on like cruises and everything. I mean, we saw the cruise ships there in the harbors, and it's like, you know, these are the kinds of people that are simultaneously supporting and degrading these people.
Yeah.
Cuba is so dependent upon the tourist economy that like it's just painful to see the things that these people have to go through, you know, sitting on the streets and just begging just for, you know, attention from tourists, because they know even if they get like $1 out of that, that can hold them over for a week.
Yeah.
It's crazy. And it's heartbreaking. And I hate to be in a society where we allow ourselves to go to other places and treat these other people just solely as objects, a means to an end, and then go back to our own nations. We go to these other nations to escape from our own nations, but at the same time, we take advantage of these people, and we know it. We know it. We can't even say that we don't know it. We take advantage of them, and we feel bad about it, even if we try to suppress that.
Right.
And then we just go back home just so we can brag about going to this other place and pushing the denial deeper and deeper.
You make a lot of great points there. So let's shift gears really quick, because, I mean, I feel like I couldn't do this episode without talking about the Kanye controversy. I mean, it's been everywhere. I mean, every time I look on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, we're talking about Kanye. And so I really want to dive into this piece, particularly because it's the youth takeover. And I want to see how young people, or, you know, even like, you know, younger people feel about what Kanye is doing, because I know he gets a lot of criticism because of the things that he says that comes out his mouth. And I just want to know, do you think that Kanye is for the culture? Like, or is he just this, you know, this evil guy that people are really painting him out to be?
Well, oh my goodness. I mean, the stuff that Kanye says, I've probably said worse. And I mean, like, the only people who will yell at me are, like, my mom and my friends who I tell them to. But even my friends are just like, yeah, me too. Like, yeah. Seriously. Like, I think the fact that Kanye says controversial things is so important. I think it's really important to see people's reactions to it, first and foremost, and to see how people are going to take those reactions, and are we going to make changes based on these reactions, or are we just going to keep fighting about it and creating hashtags about it? It's like the whole thing with school shootings. Are we going to pray about it, or are we actually going to do something about it? Kanye's bringing these issues to light, talking about how slavery is a choice. Okay, I really disagree with that statement. I take issue with that, but I don't take issue with the fact that he said it. He brought something really important to light. He brought to light the fact that he has been so immersed in this white privilege that somebody needs to bring him home. We need to bring Kanye home. We don't need to mute him. We need to bring him home. We need to talk about slavery. Okay, he said, it's kind of like reverse psychology. He said, it's so far in the past, why are we still talking about it? That, makes it even more important that we need to have these discussions, because people are forgetting about it. People are, getting into this mindset of, okay, it's in the past, we don't have to worry about it. But like I said before, history is a huge part of culture, and it will keep building upon itself and repeating itself if we do not learn from it. We need to educate each other. We don't just need to sit there and fight about it and rant on Twitter about it. We need to make change. We need to form groups of people of all different ideologies so that we can come together and talk about our differences, not fight about them. We need to talk about them. We don't need to have the same groups in an echo chamber day in and day out, just, spitting what they feel just to comfort each other. We don't need comfort at this point. We need real change. And I feel like Kanye making us feel uncomfortable is important for us to be able to dialogue about this. And if he, someone has to do it. Someone has to do it. He did it. And I don't necessarily applaud him for it. I just think I think it makes us think we should take care of our Black people that are in these higher positions and make sure that they know who they are still.
It's kind of like the idea of the complacency piece, just when people even talked about Trump getting in office, and maybe if we would have had a different president, we wouldn't feel so on edge to have to make change or have to do something. But there are certain things that happen in our life that put us in these uncomfortable positions in which we have to act. We have to do something.
We have to respond.
Yes, I definitely, I like that. So last but not least, I just want to know, what type of advice would you give young people? I mean, you just had so many experiences, right? And so the average person in the city of Detroit won't even get to half of what you've experienced, but it's made you the person that you are. It's allowed you to be able to kind of grow in your spaces and even take chances on, going to university and all of this type of stuff. What advice would you give a young person?
Well, knowing what I've known, I've traveled a lot, and I think the one thing that traveling has really done for me has made me shut up a lot. You really have to sit back and listen and take in the sensory experiences, ears, eyes, mouth, smell the world. It smells really incredible.
And different in different spaces.
Yes, it really does. But you just have to be open-minded. You're going to find people that are more open-minded, people that are more closed-minded. You just have to learn to respect them. And especially in the context of Detroit, I'm getting more into the arts, the young arts scene and everything. I'm in an art collective now, and I've just, met a lot of people. Detroit is a contact zone. There are a lot of people with a lot of different beliefs and a lot of different ideas, a lot of different life experiences, and you have to be willing and able to learn from them. I think the greatest gift of life is education, and if you don't take education, if you don't take the opportunity to educate yourself wherever and whenever you can, I think that's something that you're wasting. And not just for the youth, but for everyone in the city and everyone in the world. Just allow yourself to open your ears and shut your mouth and see what happens. Seriously, you don't know what'll happen.
I'm so happy you joined me, Indira. You're so great. I kept saying it on the trip, you're great. You're going to have to be on Politic. And thank you so much, Indira, for joining me today. I've had such a great dialogue. I'm so excited that you agreed to come. We had so many experiences and talks and dialogues when we were in Cuba around so many things. So just thank you so much, and I hope that you also enjoyed yourself. This has been another episode of Politicking. I hope you all stay tuned. You can join us on politicking.org, as well as follow our Instagram and Twitter, Politicking. Have a good one.